Today's objectives, hopefully by the end of the presentation, I will have been able to outline why it's important for us to talk about bullying with our kids with autism, and also why our students with autism might be at risk from bullying or from becoming bullies themselves. And I also want to outline what we can do to prevent children from being bullied or becoming bullies, and to highlight the role of the BCBA. So it's quite hard to establish the true incidence rate of bullying, as data from different sources report lots of different findings. But what we can tell is that bullying is very widespread, and that goes for kids with ASD and typically developing kids too. It often also goes unnoticed, and it can have quite serious, immediate and long-lasting consequences, both for the child being bullied and the bully themselves. So why should we talk about bullying? Well, basically bullying is, as I said, can have wide-reaching consequences for both the bully and the child being bullied. Now, bullying can take many different forms, and that includes verbal harassment, physical threats, deliberate exclusion, threatening, written, and so on. And the behaviour is aggressive and typically involves an imbalance of power, and the aim is to control or harm others. And it also involves repetition, so whether that's that it's already happened more than once or that it has the potential to. And also you should note that the imbalance of power doesn't have to just be physical strength. It could be access to embarrassing information about a child, or being more popular, being the most popular, and so on. It's also important to realise that 40 to 75% of bullying incidents in school take place during class breaks and other areas, or areas of the school where teachers and other adults are often not present. So teachers are quite often, or school staff are quite often not always aware, and they can find it hard to pinpoint bullies. So I find a statistic here that school staff may only notice or intervene in maybe 1 out of 25 incidents of bullying. That's quite worrying. It's also why I'll mention later on the idea of targeting peers. So getting peers to work together to help teachers combat bullying, since the teachers aren't with the children all the time, or during times when bullying is most likely to occur. Students with autism spectrum disorders might be at greater risk from being bullied or bullying others. There's not that much research out there conducted in looking at the relation between learning disabilities and bullying, but the info that is out there seems to be suggesting that children with special needs in general are about 2 to 3 times more likely to be bullied than their typically developing peers. And there was one study out in 2010, Mike Twyman and colleagues, they looked at age 8 to 17-year-olds with ASD, and they had bully victimization scores that were more than 3 times as high as the students in their control group without special needs. And they also found that children with ASD might be more likely to bully others as well. And then another report that came out very recently by IAN, which is the Kennedy Krieger Institute, they reported that children with Asperger's may be more likely to be bullied, but it's not really clear why that is at the moment. I mean, it could be a bunch of things. It could be just that the children with Asperger's are more able to report bullying or to understand that they're being bullied. It may be that it's more visible in the public school settings or so where these children might be, or that more kids in Asperger's are in the typical classrooms where the research seems to suggest that public schools, for example, have higher rates of bullying and so on. So as I said, children who are bullied can experience a wide range of both short-term and long-lasting issues, and that goes from physical symptoms, emotional, mental health issues, and educational problems. Oh, and I should mention as well, of course, that's not just the children who are bullied, but the children who are actually bullies themselves also potentially can have a lot of difficulties later on and immediately. So every school has to ensure a free and appropriate public education is available to all students with disabilities. And obviously bullying can pose a threat to students' learning and their ability to actually access their free and appropriate public education. What makes children with ASD? We know that children with ASD can have unique mannerisms or behaviours that potentially can attract attention from peers, or unwanted attention, and make them the targets of bullies. They can also tend to have difficulties in initiating and maintaining friendships. And we know that friendships can potentially be something that can protect kids from being bullied, or at least mediate the effects as well. And then our kids tend to have inflexible or rigid patterns of behaviour that can make them easily provoked by other kids. Where they just have difficulties in understanding other people's intentions and so on. The Ian report highlighted a few common themes or behaviours and so on that seem to or be the target of bullies in kids with ASD, and those were things like clumsiness, inflexibility or rigidity, frequent meltdowns, poor hygiene, and perseverating on favourite topics when others are bored or annoyed. One of the problems of bullying with children with ASD is that our kids have specific challenges in terms of, for example, identifying that bullying is even going on. Because our kids may not be able to say, for example, communicate that they're being bullied. They may not be able to tell us that they're being bullied. They may also just not know that they're being bullied. And they may not know that they're being bullies. So what do we do? What is the first thing that we should do? Well, I think it's really important to emphasise that we shouldn't wait for bullying to present as a problem, particularly considering what I just was talking about in terms of kids and maybe not being able to tell us that they're being bullied or not know that they're being bullied. So that basically means it can sometimes be really hard to know if it's actually happening. And from what I said earlier about how sometimes teachers can find it hard to know what's going on, and they can miss it because it's happening at times when they're not around. So really, we don't want to wait for it to present as a problem before we do something. The first thing anyone should do, whether that's the parent or the BCBA, if you're concerned or you have a child who you think might be vulnerable, or you think that they may already have been the target of bullying, is to communicate with the school and with everyone else involved in the child's care. So if you're a parent, you want to talk to not just the school, but you want to tell your BCBA, if you have a BCBA with you working at home or so on, tell them so that they can then incorporate strategies into your home program as well as within the school. And you want to meet with the teacher and anyone else and discuss your fears. Talk about any incidents that are happening or your fears about what might happen, and make sure that you document everything. Then you want to review the school's anti-bullying policy. So every school should have an anti-bullying policy, and if they don't have one, then what you want to do is advocate for the adoption of guidelines. And you really want to make sure, whether the school has one already or you're getting them to put one in place, is that it covers all forms of bullying, so not just, say, aggression. And know your legal rights, because bullying based on a child's disability can be considered disability harassment, which is prohibited under, first of all, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And the US Department of Education, they define disability harassment as intimidation or abusive behaviour towards a student based on disability that creates a hostile environment by interfering with or denying a student's participation in or receipt of benefits, services or opportunity in the institution's programme. So obviously that involves learning in school and being being able to participate in all the school activities and so on. Remember that bullying can take many different forms, or harassment can take many different forms. It doesn't have to just be physical, it can be verbal and written and so on. And also bear in mind that harassment can occur in any location, and it doesn't just have to be in the classroom. If it's occurring in hallways or, say, the physical education fields, or even an outing outside of school that's sponsored by the school, that's still covered. Legally, the school district has to take reasonable and appropriate steps to end the bullying of the child, or they could be in violation of federal, state and local laws. And all staff have to investigate incidents promptly and respond appropriately. So if they don't take responsible and appropriate steps, then you're going to want to use some of the resources at the end of the presentation to figure out what to do next legally, because legally the school's not doing what they're supposed to do. And I believe that in California anyway, there was new legislation that I think just came into effect at the beginning of July, and I think it requires teachers to undergo training to handle this kind of situation, the bullying situation. And I think it also covers students, that students who are bullied can actually switch schools if the problem continues to persist. The next thing that's really important is whether you're worried about your child getting bullied or whether your child has already been the victim of bullying, is to make sure that you utilise their IEP. You can use that to include information about bullying and strategies to protect the child from bullying. And you're going to want to make sure that a variety of supports and accommodations for your child, as well as strategies, are incorporated into that report. I would also suggest that you make sure that some adult in the school is identified with whom the child can report to, or who the child can ask for assistance from, and also how the staff are going to document and report incidents. So isn't it just all about punishing the bully? Well, sometimes that's what we hear. We think that it's just about punishing the bully. And it is really important to establish consistent consequences for following or violating rules against bullying. But simply punishing the bully, we know, is not the answer, because the bully is only the tip of the iceberg. So combating bullying effectively requires strategies for the bully and the child and the community as a whole. We really need to understand why bullying is happening on a global level. So understanding the bully, the child's needs, and also why the bullying is continuing in the school. So what's going on in the community as a whole? That means that bullying is everyone's responsibility. So everyone has to be involved, and everyone needs to be aware, and everyone needs to involve themselves in changing the situation. So that's going to involve changes and interventions at the school level, the classroom level, and of course at the child level. And that's not just for the victim, but for the bully as well. In order to address bullying at the global level overall, everyone needs to be educated. So that's the teachers, other school staff, the BCBAs, the parents, the peers, everyone involved. And then you need to create a safe and confidential ways to report bullying. So that's the child and the parent. So both the child and the parent need to feel like they can report bullying and they're not going to be ostracized in any way, or suffer any negative consequences or whatever, that they have somewhere they can go and report it and be heard. And then we want to improve vigilance by school staff and students. Like I said, school staff, it seems like school staff only intervene in maybe 1 out of 25 incidences of bullying. So we really want to make sure, say, introducing more shadowing of the child, or more supervision, higher levels of supervision, and then involving the peers is a really good strategy, like a buddy program where you have older children buddying up with the younger peers and helping to promote friendship and support that way. Or it could be a peer advocacy program where you're educating the peers, and then the peers are standing up for, or the peers are standing up for the children. And again, we really need to look at why the bullying is happening, and then collaborating to develop strategies to address both behaviour deficits and behaviour problems at the bullies, for the bully and the victim. And then, like I said, punishment isn't the answer to the problem. We really need to make sure there's a system in place to reward and build appropriate peer behaviour, because we know, as behaviour analysts, we know that reinforcement is the key to truly long-lasting behaviour change. From that, as you can gather, there's no single approach to all situations. It's going to require a bunch of different changes, both at the school level, at the individual level, and so on. So since most BCBAs, they work, say, in home programs and so on, and there's some working in school, so what can they do for the victim or the bully? Regardless of whether your client is the victim of bullying or is the bully themselves, you're going to want to do 4 things. You're going to want to identify antecedent strategies, increase and teach new skills, decrease problem behaviours, and educate and train others. And of course, do any of the other things that I have already outlined in terms of the school. And you can be the child's advocate. If you work in the school, then you can discuss policies and work with teachers to formulate school-wide and child-specific strategies. So I'm just going to go into a bit more detail about, say, the typical or themselves. First of all, thinking about antecedent strategies. So that could be anything from, say, allowing children, trying to sort it with the teacher so that the child can sit nearer the teacher at the front, or that they can sit at a table with particular friends or with particular peers who are able to buddy up with them or be a child. Another thing you could do is say, for example, is to allow children to leave early, or arrange for the child to leave class early to avoid incidents in the hallways. And then arranging for shadowing of the child if that's possible. That could be accompanying the child to the bathroom or shadowing them in the playground and so on. And then making sure that appropriate peer interactions are reinforced. So working with the school to ensure that that there's some kind of system in there to build good peer relationships. And then introducing a buddy or a peer advocacy system. So like I said, having the buddy system is simply usually just the older children buddying up or being like a mentor type thing to the younger kids, or the peer advocacy program. One of the successful peer advocacy programs is run by Pacer, and I'll give you at the end there's resources and there's go to get more information from their site about that. So we know that children who are able to make and maintain friendships are less vulnerable to bullying. So it's important for us to look at our kids and teach them. As a BCBA, what can I teach? Well, first of all, those are things like conversation, initiating a conversation or maintaining conversation, and being able to, say, transition different topics. So being able to pick appropriate topics of conversation and then being able to follow different changes in the topic of conversation. And then also things like being aware of who it is that they're talking to and the context that they're having a conversation. Modifying what they're talking about or how they're talking, with the language that they're using, and so on. And then helping our kids develop appropriate non-vocal social behaviours. So understanding people's body language and facial expressions. So like, for example, knowing when you're talking about something and somebody's really bored or clearly not interested or even irritated by what you're saying. And also, you know, obviously being able to use non-vocal behaviours yourself. Other things would be social interaction skills. So we would teach things like basic assertiveness skills. So, for example, dealing with gaining or regaining access to items that the child wants, or how to appropriately defend yourself in a disagreement, or even how to appropriately express your opinions if you have different opinions from other people, and in an appropriate way. And then also of refusing, we would teach kids how to appropriately refuse, or how to not agree to engage in inappropriate actions or activities that other children or peers might be pressuring them into. And then obviously things like apologizing, like how to accept apologies when other people have done something wrong to you, but then also how to deal with when you have done something wrong to someone else, being able to apologize to them. And then sharing in turn, taking some basic things like that. Obviously being able to share and take turns with your peers is going to be great for your friendships. Another thing, something like compliments is really important. Compliments can really help a child increase their likability with peers, but also can be very useful for example, for initiating conversation, thinking of something that's opening line to say to another child. And then we would try and work on things like some kind of self-esteem skills. So that could involve, for example, dealing with conflict, like identifying when conflict is occurring, the cause of the conflict, and then figuring out what to do and how to resolve it appropriately. Winning and losing, for example, being able to tolerate when you've lost, or knowing what to say to someone when they lose, and then being a good winner and accepting when other people win. And then making positive self-statements. So we know that typically developing kids are often heard bragging about how great they are and showing off to their friends and so on. And so what we want to do is we want to teach our kids how to identify their own strengths and weaknesses in themselves, but also in others and so on. And we also want to think about teaching play skills and helping children build shared interests. So whenever we're teaching our kids games and activities or so on, we really want to look at what their peers are interested in. We don't want to just teach what we think they should be able to do or what they should play. We want to look at what their peers are interested in, so that when they go to school or when their peers come over to play, that their peers are going to want to come back and that they're going to be able to join in. So things like kids, like, you know, video games or football, or you call it soccer or football, might be really important. And then general knowledge. So giving kids, we would try and teach our kids general knowledge, popular culture stuff that their peers are all talking about and excited about, so that they have things that they can share and talk about with their friends. And then humor and jokes is another example of something like that will help them interact with their friends better, so on. So another area of skills, I mentioned earlier that kids who are inflexible can be targets for bullies, because it often means that they have meltdowns. And one of the studies that I was reading, parents were reporting that kids often deliberately would try and push the children's buttons to cause them to have a meltdown. So that's clearly an area that we might want to work on with our kids. So teaching them how to identify when their behaviour is maybe no longer appropriate, and then helping them generate new alternative things that they can do in those situations. And then also inhibition. So I also mentioned that sometimes if kids are displaying certain behaviours that attract attention from peers, so you might have a child who's engaging in stereotypy, so that could be like a non-vocal, like hand flapping or something, or it could be vocal, like echolalia. And so we want to help our kids maybe recognize that and teach them how to replace it with something more appropriate. And then waiting's another one, teaching kids how to wait appropriately. And then self-management, self-awareness skills and so on, and social problem solving, like how to figure out what to do when there's a problem with their peers. And then emotional self-control, again, helping the kids to control to triggers. Another area, again, perspective taking. I mentioned earlier that kids can be targets of bullies because they just don't understand what another person's intentions are, for example, or maybe they start talking about something without regard to what the person already knows or what they're thinking or even what their preferences are. Maybe they're suggesting play activities that the peer clearly has no interest in, and so on. Here's one, detecting sarcasm. That's interesting. Often, like, our kids just won't understand when a kid's being sarcastic to them, and they can misinterpret it as them being genuine. Some other areas I've mentioned, like clumsiness, for example, was reported as making kids vulnerable to bullying. So motor targets you might want to introduce, and those can also, motor targets obviously can also help build a child's ability to participate in games that peers really like, so locomotor type games, or even fine motor stuff like art projects and so on. And then increasing the child's independence at daily living targets, their daily living skills would be really important. And like I mentioned, hygiene was one of the main things that children were bullied for. And then speech issues, for example, prosody. We would, if a child has good language skills, but maybe their intonation is strange, or they aren't using any emotion to regulate their voice and so on, it might draw attention from peers or make them sound a little bit weird, that can result in them being victims of bullying. And as well as building skills, you're going to want to address challenging behaviours, and that's both obviously if the child who is the victim of bullying, if they're being targeted of bullying because they're engaged in chaotic or challenging behaviour that's drawing it, or they're being picked on because of that, or the bullies engaging in challenging behaviour. As a BCBA, you're going to want to work with the teacher and pinpoint what those problem behaviours are. Obviously, carry out your functional assessment, figure out what the function of behaviour, why is the behaviour happening, and then formulate a BIP, or behaviour intervention plan. And you really need to make sure that your behaviour intervention plan is going to be to be integrated across the home and the school environments, and it's going to work for whoever's involved in implementing it. And then you want to make sure, obviously, that you teach appropriate alternatives to replace the problem behaviour and allow both the bully or the child who's being bullied to get what their needs ways. And then you want to make sure that you train and support family and school staff enough to be able to implement that BIP so that it's successful. You're going to want to make sure that skills that you teach, all these wonderful friendship skills and so on, are generalized across from the home and school. So if you're teaching these skills in the home, that they are going to be of use to the child in school. So you're going to want to do things like making the teaching setting as school as possible, engage, get the collaboration with the school and the teacher's aid, and make sure that they know what you're working on and that they can help with that. And then arranging peer play or play dates, obviously, so the child can practice those newly learned skills with peers in a supported and safe environment where you can help out. And again, collaboration with the school. Most importantly, remember that the effective interventions will consider the child being bullied, the bully, and the community. So it's not just about teaching skills to the child who's being bullied or decreasing problem behaviour or even teaching skills to the bully or punishing the bully. It really is something that has to be addressed at all levels. So in summary then, Bullying is everyone's responsibility, so all of us have to take responsibility for coming up with strategies and putting those strategies. We need to listen and take it seriously. What we think, we need to listen to parents or teachers or whoever is reporting or concerned about bullying. We need to take it seriously, and we need, even if we don't know if the bullying is happening, we need to put in place strategies, for example, in the IEP or in the home program that you're teaching these teachers are going to help prevent bullying from happening. And there's no single approach for all situations. You're going to have to understand why the bullying is happening in that particular situation with that particular child or particular children. And BCBAs really do have a lot of valuable knowledge and skills that can help prevent children with ASD from being bullied or becoming themselves. I mean, when I was first asked by a parent about bullying, as a BCBA, I just thought to myself, I don't know anything about bullying. I have no clue what to do. But when I began to delve into it a bit more, I realised that I do have a lot of skills as a BCBA, and I hope that anyone who's coming to this presentation from the point of thinking I know absolutely nothing about how to deal with bullying can go away thinking, actually, I do know more than I thought I did, especially in terms of what you can teach your kids and helping them develop skills and so on that will make them less vulnerable. And then, of course, collaboration is the key. It's really, really important that everyone collaborates together to develop. So I have some general resources here that I think are a really good start if you're looking for stuff to help you either as a parent, a teacher, or a BCBA. So first of all, there's Pacer's National Bullying Prevention Centre resources. A bunch of stuff on there, including information about their peer advocacy program, which has been shown to be very successful in some schools for decreasing bullying and preventing bullying. And then also the Bully Project here, the second one here, they actually have a special needs toolkit, which is quite handy, and that they have a toolkit which is for teachers, parents, across the board, and maybe clinicians as well. I can't remember exactly. But within those toolkits, they have things like sample letters that parents can send to schools, and what to do, things about IEPs and legal rights and so on. And then the Ian Community Research Report, that's the new report that came out on bullying in children with ASD. I think it's based on parent surveys, so they can't draw concrete conclusions about it, but it's still very interesting and informative. And then there's government resources here at stopbullying.gov. So if you're having difficulty with the school and the school are not dealing with or not able to deal with the bullying problem effectively, then legal resources here. If you think your child is harassed as a result of their disability, then you can contact the US Department of Education or go there to get information. You can also go to the Office of Special Education Programs and the US Department of Justice website as well. They'll all guide you in the legal steps and your rights. End of the presentation. Thank you.